Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 2 of the Brisbane Real Estate Tips webcast. This is where we deconstruct all things property that you wouldn't normally get from a real estate agent in a format that's nice and easy for you to consume. Today, I'm joined by Ian Kelly, who's a certified financial planner. We'll be running through all things like how to save for a property and so on. So, Ian, thanks for joining me today.
Certainly. Thanks, John.
No worries, mate. All right, so can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and I guess your experience?
Good, certainly. First thing I've got to do is, with any sort of discussion like this, that any process or anything that somebody prospectively takes away, that this is a generalised discussion and is not to be taken as financial advice. If somebody has a need for that, they need to either see their respective advisor or come see us, or whatever the variation on the theme is, but it's not aimed at any one person in particular. My background is I was in the corporate world for quite a while. I had a mid-career change in my early 40s and spent the last 15 years or so as a certified financial planner. My background has always been as an investor myself, but I've been doing that for way too long. Now I'm finding that what I want to do is bring those corporate skills back to the retail level and actually have a positive impact on people's scenarios, particularly through the prioritising of spends and commitment to saving, whatever shape or form that takes.
Fantastic. Well, I think if anyone's listened to the webcast before, they understand the format. Basically, I'll run through a few questions with you, and then I'll finish off with a few rapid-fire questions. So, if you're ready to get stuck into the questions, we'll get going. How's that sound?
That's great.
Yep. Excellent. All right. So, mate, you've been in financial planning for I guess the corporate financial planning and retail for what, 15, 20 plus years. What trends have you seen your clients, I guess, investments? Are a sort of property portfolio to share portfolio? Like what's the mix been?
Yeah. No, I guess the best lesson learned is very individualized for either a client or a family on how they approach that. And there are strengths and weaknesses to both processes of wealth accumulation, but in isolation, they can work in some situations and not work in others. So each has its strength and weakness. The property share, and I actually think it's a bit of a distractor from the real issue. The real issue is you need to acquire financial assets, and what shape or colour they are is a function of your degree of understanding and comfort with the process, and to the extent to which you want to engage a coach or not to engage a coach in that process. So if I was to say, for example, what do we do as a planner? We look at advising property shares, money management, budgeting, investment, superannuation, and that in itself starts to create a headache because a lot of people have good skill sets in one small corner, but to spread it out and get a more of a strategic approach is probably the better way of looking at the property and shares question. I've seen properties work particularly well in the last 20 years for a whole bunch of reasons to do with credit. It's going to be interesting to see if it's going to produce the same return over the next 20.
Yeah, right. Okay. And obviously, just going to explain this to the viewers. This is something that you'd previously told me. Ian and I actually used to work together in a past life. But in terms of your advice around I guess property investment and all that sort of stuff, you guys can't actually give I guess direct property advice, can you? You can't say go out and buy, you know, one Parklands Drive because you know the growth there is going to be amazing. You know, generally that takes someone who with a real estate license and a financial planning, I guess, certified financial planner as well. Is that accurate?
It's very much, well, the financial advisor is licensed with Australian Securities Investment Commission, ASIC, and he's licensed to deal in financial products. Residential real estate in itself is not classified as a licensed product. What happens in real life is people that are involved in the property industry get involved with making commentary on property. Now, as an advisor, necessarily, I should be able to speak to property as an asset type and class. And in our former life, where you were an accountant, a senior accountant within this practice room, that's the best sort of advisor-accountant relationship, because it's about cash flow, it's about tax deductibility, it's about suitably how the client can manage it over time, what provision for contingency they have. All those sorts of issues are very important. Now, I would certainly provide support to a client that was looking to buy an investment property. My licensee and my licensing conditions preclude me from talking about an individual property. And so it should, largely because it's a curly basket of worms, and we don't have any professional indemnity insurance for it because we can't attest to the quality of the property.
Exactly.
It's a structural thing, and I actually think it works better for the investor that way. The only issue is an opportunity cost. But anybody who's investing in a property, you need to bring a couple of people. You need to get a credible agent, real estate agent, and you need somebody to help you to guide you through the maths if you don't understand how to do that yourself.
That's right. That's right. And that sort of brings me on to what I was talking to Stuart, who's I guess my preferred mortgage broker, Mortgage Choice. What we were talking about, previously, and it comes down to a lot of people. What we find is a lot of people actually go straight to us when they want to list their property rather than going to, say, a mortgage broker to say, look, I'm looking at selling my property. What's it worth? I'm looking at moving here. What are my options? All this sort of stuff, and getting their ducks in line first. Rather than, I guess, coming to us and us going, yeah, of course, because all real estate agents just jump at the opportunity to listing without necessarily at all focusing on the client or for want of a better term, what's best for the client. So my discussion with Stuart was around having a solid team together of a mortgage broker, a financial planner, a real estate agent, and an accountant to have all of your finances sorted. And that sounds like a scary prospect to a lot of people because they think straight away oh, that's going to be a lot of money. Obviously it's money invested the right way, and it can save you a lot of money in the future. But what I guess that discussion was more around the need for financial planners and mortgage brokers to be involved in the entire sales process, and I guess the need for real estate agents to be considered a little bit more highly in the chain when, I guess, making these decisions as well. Would you agree with that?
I think you're probably in a bit of a unique position with your accountancy background, and naturally, well, you'd expect you'd understand that numbers process. I've got a very strong obligation law to act in the client's best duty, best interests. It's formalised now in what's called the best interest duty. And if you're providing a recommendation to somebody you must have a basis for it. And in a sense, that's exactly what you're talking about. You're trying to bring all these subsets, be they the mortgage broker to get the finance, the real estate agent to actually get the property, the advisor to make sure that it's all actually going to play out, and the accountant to make sure that the tax concessions and treatment of the purchase are done the most efficient possible. So if a client chooses not to take advantage of those skill sets, they might be able to say a penny here and a penny there. But what bringing others to the table does is it reduces the risk that you're going to fall over for reasons other than just in the property. So in other words, you don't have the insurances in place, you don't have the cash flow in place, you don't have any protection for loss of job or loss of income. Those things haven't been brought to the fore. So it's purchasing an investment property should be just looked at dispassionately. It's another business transaction. That's how it should be looked at. And loyalty in that sense should be point operated. So.
Yeah, exactly. No,
it's not.
Yeah. Definitely understand. I guess moving away from that a little bit, moving more onto more into the savings side of property. Look, there's people my age. I'm not afraid to tell everyone I'm about to turn 27 actually. So there's people around my age demographic, obviously, who've already bought, and there's people, I guess, in my age group looking to buy. There's people in the age group above me, the 35-year-olds that are still looking to buy. It's just a matter of cash flow is what we were talking about earlier before the webcast. Are you able to explain, I guess that discussion that we were having before? I think it's just so valuable to the listeners out there to understand, I guess, what it takes to save for a home. And also, if you, I guess, second part to that question is, throwing in a couple of tips and tricks to, to help, us, I guess, young people get into market, or, I guess people who are 30 plus as well get into the market.
Good question, and something that we run into regularly, and certainly in the accounting practice, I'll get this question asked regularly. There's certainly a stronger relationship there than a normal planner, for example. So it's really the most, and this isn't a textbook answer, but this is more a life experience answer. Somehow you've got to get together a deposit. So it all depends if you're buying the house as a single or you're buying the house as a couple, if that's what you're trying to do. As soon as you introduce another person into the mix, you then have a very clear need to establish joint priorities. What we quite often see is a couple that have come to us that bought a house that have absolutely maxed themselves out, debt, very little discretionary cash flow. They've overcommitted for reasons that they're not quite sure of, and that hurts. It means the next 10 years they're under the pump and they're really struggling, and it puts an inordinate amount of financial stress on any relationship.
Yeah, so right.
If you're starting from a ground base of, let's say, $10,000 in the bank and you need to save $100,000, well, it's patently obvious. The more you earn, the more savings capacity you have, the greater your ability to do it. Now, the other thing we're starting to see is some support from family members who stump up that first part of a loan and then it's paid back separately. Now, there's some strengths and weaknesses to that. Largely, it tends to be problematic unless there's a lot of discipline. So, the most effective way I've seen so far is a couple try and make a clear commitment, set a decent set of priorities in terms of what do they spend their money on first, and then build a set of notional buckets where their finances go. So they make their commitments to saving early. So as soon as the pay packet turns up, it's split in however many ways. And whatever the savings target is, if that's the biggest priority that they have, that's what they commit to. And going out on the Terps and blowing $500 to watch a game of football comes well down the pecking order. Difficult thing to do. And it goes more to personality type. But it takes good coaching to get it to work. I've seen it work a number of times quite successfully. The ones that don't work are those that are ill-disciplined. There's plenty of articles floating around the net. How do you save up? But most of it comes back to just being disciplined and setting up a bunch of buckets, working out what the price point you want to get into, having a realistic discussion, define realistic, having a frank discussion about what you can afford, and then sticking to that, but get your foot into the market at some point. It's important to get your foot into the market. Now, what we're seeing inner city Sydney, and to a lesser extent in Brisbane, is there's an increasing demographic of couples without children, and this goes into the 40s now, where they haven't wanted children, so they're more able to save. So they tend to go for an inner city unit or apartment rather than the white picket fence thing. So you've really got to start to look at what asset you're trying to buy and how it's going to work.
And I think you probably hit the nail on the head there in terms of a lot of people, they, in my opinion anyway, and from what I see, they do overreach initially when they're buying a home, and it's scary. Like you said, the most important thing is getting your foot just into the market, and without without that overreaching goal, and bring it back to a bit more of a realistic goal, or even below that, I guess ideal price. Even if you go a little bit below, at least you're getting on the market a little bit earlier, and it seems far more achievable. So I think that's something that a lot of people probably don't think of as well, but something that you guys would advise on. Because we all know it's hard to save, but managing your expectations and being responsible, but also accountable to someone else. If you're saving with your partner, being accountable to, say, your financial planner, I think could help a great deal.
The challenge is that my experience with clients going to buy a property, they have a look at the gross numbers of their wages, and then they'll go and talk probably to an agent, and he'll work out their capacity in terms of their highest capacity. And it's quite rare that you see somebody put contingency, and by that I mean make some allowances for life journey, and it all depends where they are in their life at the time, whether they're a young couple starting out, a young couple being together a while with kids, a young couple with kids going to school, and an older couple with kids going to high school. So there's all these little life stages, and each of them have their own set of challenges. What tends to happen more often than not is people back themselves into the biggest asset they can get into for reasons that they're not quite sure of, and then they saddle with a massive amount of debt. That is a very poor way of actually structuring the process. trying to fix it up after the event. You're much better scope out. Okay, well, if we borrowed $400,000 for a unit or whatever, and then in 7 years' time we borrowed back against that unit, turned the unit into investment property, and then bought our own home with the equity we would save. That's probably a better stepping stone than trying to jump straight into $600,000, $700,000 house, as we see young couples, professional couples.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And when I'm sort of scouting for buyers, because as I think I've spoken to you before, I've got a lot of my clients are on the buyer side of the scale, probably because of this blog and webcast and I guess my profile and my age. I've got a lot of buyers. They're often asking me, where to buy, and at the end of the day, I'm telling them, well, do you want to buy an apartment or a house? If you want to buy a house, let's be realistic. And they don't often like don't often like the advice, because if I personally think, while you're young, you've got time to make mistakes. Yes, we've discussed that before, but you've also got that chance to just really get in front. And that's what I find. What a lot of wealthy families, or not even necessarily wealthy families, but families that have lived quite modestly, but they're comfortable in life. They're very comfortable because they've taken on this this advice that they've gotten, which is to live within their means and to be disciplined and be accountable to one another, and they've got that focus and that goal of getting that one house and then two, and it's a really, I guess, hard. What's the term? It's a hard toss up, really. Like it's a hard juggle. A lot of people obviously want lifestyle, and convenience, and it costs money. Those two things cost money, but at the end of the day, my advice is always, if you want to get ahead financially, because you will regret that later on in life. There's no doubt. Unless you're willing to part with that and say, yeah, no regrets, that's fine. It's a very, very difficult conversation for me to have with my buyers.
I guess from my perspective in this space is that the greatest test I run is, that's a good idea, but in comparison to what? Because usually what happens is people fixate on a particular standard or style or property that has an appeal. Now, you use the word lifestyle. I think that's a marketing term for that's how they see themselves, or self-actualization. And so they fixate on that, and then they don't very rarely consider dispassionately what other options are available to them to meet that need. Now, as an example, I've got a client in Sydney who's currently living on a yacht. They've been living on a yacht for probably 5 years, and he's saved a ton of dough, an absolute ton of dough, because his living costs is really compressed. Equally, I've got clients here in Brisbane, both engineers, both in 250k. They've saved bugger all. So it's to do with his ability to be able to focus on what is the important thing. I need to accumulate enough money for a deposit to buy a house. Do I need to live in the house at this point in time? Well, actually, I don't. He's not, at this point in the roundabout, he's not significantly partnered up. He was, that didn't work. But all along, he's been able to, gets this house thing sorted. And all of us are in the process of accumulating financial assets, so we can choose to do what we want to do at some point in the future. Call it retirement, call it whatever you want. retirement's a function of income, not a function of age. So if you've got enough assets stacked away, enough property stacked away, and well, who says you have to work to do nothing on? So it's a matter of working out. The big thing is that's a good idea, but in comparison to what else can you do with that money at the time?
Yeah, exactly. Perspective is everything.
That's where bringing other people in on the mix is a really sound idea. They might tell you things you don't want to hear, and that's difficult to put your head in. But if it comes back to, are you looking at this as a business transaction, or are you just running off without any breaks and doing what you want to do without this? Emotional intelligence, I think, is in the mix. So you either get some or you buy some in.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. All right. Well, I mean, changing a little bit off topic to something a little bit more exciting for listeners. This is something that I'm sure a lot of people dream about at night. And obviously their first thought, and that's to win the lotto. Obviously, people's first thought is, well, I'll go out and buy a Ferrari and buy a house and be done with it. I just wanted to ask you. I was having this conversation with with my better half recently, and I said to her, look, the first thing I'd do is I would go straight to my financial planner, and I'd be discussing this with him, and saying, and this is based on my goals. What do I need to do to essentially semi-retire now with this money? So say it was $25 million. In your experience, what do most people do? What should they be doing? And if you can give, examples for two age demographics, let's say 25 and 55.
Well, fortunately, I've had a client that's won sizable lotto. And he's got that plus a lot more now. What essentially, I introduced a weight concept for him, and I'll explain that. I think it was about 4.5 million or something. It's that sort of number. We agreed that the bulk of the winnings wasn't to touch for 1 year, so we couldn't do anything with it for a year. And there was something like discharge the mortgage debt on his house. Don't tell anybody he won for a holiday, because family come knocking, and they come knocking with really good reasons. He had an aged mother, and he sorted her situation out, so she was very comfortable, thank you very much, because whatever happened with his mum would eventually come back to him in any case, so that he won't. So, we kept the family on a similar income register with cash withdrawals, similar income for 12 months when he was at work, so he stopped working. His wife stopped working. And then after a year, we said, well, we can go on our first cruise. But the beauty of that process was nothing much changed. They had plenty of time to digest things. He was able to employ a couple of people that weren't as excited as he was about his good fortune. And it worked. Some people have a money personality, and they're very good at it. It's well known that most people that win significant sums, however they do it, end up 5 to 10 years later in exactly the same position or worse, because they don't have the skill sets to accumulate the money in the first place. So the skill sets of accumulation with the money usually lends itself to keeping it as well. Now, if it turns up unexpectedly, we're going to blow it on tours. What worked really well for this guy, like I said, just take out 12 months living expenses, pay off your debt, sort the money out, and we come back in 12 months' time and then we set up investment portfolios and put money into superannuation to hide it from tax purposes and all sorts of gear like that. And then they're living a life of riot. They're having a really good time. So,
Yep.
So
and is that the same advice you give to a 25-year-old as you would for a 55-year-old?
25-year-olds, this guy was about late 40s. 25-year-olds a good kettle of fish, but I'd do exactly the same thing. But probably with some subtle differences. I'd make sure I'd probably provide them 2 years' worth of income and piss them off overseas to travel or something like that, talking them into going overseas to travel. And just going to explore the world, not having to care to think about it. Get away from their current situation in terms of working environment and go and do what they want. All depends on, of course, on how much they win. The basic mathematics are if you have an invested amount, I'll just use the number of $1 million because that's easy calculation. Allow 5% for income and 3% for maintenance of capital value, that is a hedge against inflation. So you're going to get an 8 to 9% return on a $1 million portfolio. So that's going to provide you $50,000 worth of income taxing. So if you split that between two, $25,000 worth of income each, you're not going to be paying much tax on most of it. And $50,000 a year of income for a 25-year-old, or between two 25-year-olds, or whether if they're partners, if they're single, change the numbers a bit. But that's about your living cost, $50,000 a year for a couple. So and then anything over and above that, so you just. But the behavioural thing was get off non-deductible debt and then don't do anything for 12 months. And that is about letting the emotion of the win sort itself out and letting you go through the process rather than running around like a chicken big shot.
Yeah, right. Excellent. So no Ferrari immediately.
No, I wouldn't, because you probably wouldn't have. You've got to think about the motivation for buying. So for a 25-year-old, I think travelling, going overseas and seeing what the world's about, is probably going to be more benefit to them than buying a piece of depreciating steel. You can hire one and burn around for a couple of weeks and hire one, but I certainly wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, definitely. That's
fantastic
advice.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea. If you're going to win for like that, the idea is to keep. Do you need to buy $5,000 in cars and cars? I don't see anybody in their deathbed wish that they had more flash cars and cars than they had in life. So,
yeah, exactly.
I think
that's right.
Perfect opportunity there for a bit of emotional growth. And there's something exciting to do. Go and travel, see some countries, sail around the world, whatever sets you on fire. Go and learn a language, play guitar, whatever you do. But I certainly wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't be buying toys. I don't know anybody, and I've got a fair few clients with an awful lot of toys, and I couldn't get a stuff one.
Yeah.
Because as you age, as people age, and it's life that's this thing. But one stage there that are accumulating all the toys to impress people. And then they get to their 40s and 50s, and they just give you the stuff and feel like throwing it all up because they realise they're pointless. And it's the human relationship. So that's emotional intelligence.
Yeah, right. No, definitely.
But the time thing, that is, don't do anything for 12 months, other than just get past your normal living cost for 12 months. I think that's really smart. That tends to work well.
Yeah, right.
You don't have to do it all now. 12 months' time with 12 months travelling around the world, your views on things will be totally different.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, changing gears again, because obviously not many people win the lotto, so not many people get benefit, I guess, out of that sort of discussion. But it's just it's one of those things that I think is really important for people to think about, because we do have these pipe dreams and we do have these conversations with our friends and that. What would you do? And I encourage the listeners of this to actually to actually challenge your friends and you know, just I guess discuss what Ian's just told you, because you know the more I guess the more that thought process is worked around something like winning the lotto, um, you know, that thought process will be duplicated on things like, you know, creating a business and, you know, earning a lot of money, getting a huge pay rise. You know, these are things that they're not mutually exclusive to just winning the lotto. I think definitely definitely use that and use it wisely. So changing gears a little bit, more for the investors out there that read my blog. The in terms of ROI, I mean, for those of you who don't know what ROI is, it's return on investment. Now, there's a lot of people coming to me, a lot of buyers coming to me at the moment, asking, you know, what the ROI on my current listings is in terms of rental return, and also, you know, ROI on suburbs. I, I obviously have the knowledge there to discuss the difference between capital growth and you know, just sort of rental accumulation, but in your experience, do people, like investors generally, are they looking for capital growth? Are they looking to just build a portfolio that they can keep leveraging off? Are they doing it for tax purposes? I know that one of your main principles is never ever spend money, you know, for a tax benefit, because you know you only get back your personal tax percentage. But yeah, in your experience, do people generally buy, you know, for rent or for capital gain? What are you sort of seeing in your last sort of 20 years in the industry?
Um, Interesting question. It's it's really fuzzy in terms of the way this whole process works and actually what the total yield of an investment property is. And there's a couple of functions there. It's depending if you have an investor that's talking ROI when it's just talking rental yield, you know, it's not talking EBITs or anything like that. Um, that's a bit of a lucky discussion insofar as um, capital growth of the properties a function of population density, desirability, and location. And there's some really good work put out by local practicing from the University of Sydney to do with if you want to go around and crunch the numbers on investment property. But you really don't need to. It's a growth asset over time. It's preferentially treated in terms of the negative gearing status, or certainly is at this time. Um, the it's You're probably better served, um, depending on the sophistication of the investor, if they understand those issues of you know, depreciation schedules, those sorts of questions you would ask in the tax work. They'll understand that then they materially affects the investment property and desirability over time. Now, the actual return on the asset class is a pretty easy thing to work out. Why? Because there's just so much history out there, and this space is really heavily correlated. What isn't so well understood is the maintenance costs of holding these properties over time, and where the break-even point is, and why does real estate do so particularly well in comparison to shares? And that's an argument. So property always does better than shares, blah blah blah. Or you could say things like say shares always does better than property. But as an asset class, I can think of about 5 different distinct types of property investment. holiday rental, is it residential, is it commercial, is it industrial, it goes on and on. It's listed real estate, it's unlisted real estate. So there's not one asset class in itself. Where real estate tends to work is because somebody is heavily borrowed or leveraged into buying a significant asset with a relatively more small start point, and the cash flow can be massaged to make it work over time. But that doesn't escape the fact that you're still paying the debt, and you still need to have people renting it. So if you bought a rental property up at Moranbah with, coalfields home, you pay $350,000 for it, and you're renting it at $800 a week. Now you're in a pile of dirt because nobody up there even wants to live up there because the coal's gone away. So it's very much horses. Yeah. So it's the leveraging that creates, but it's a growth asset. The real estate cycle, I'd argue, is certainly no less than 10 years. So we've got to get the investor. Are we an investor or are we a speculator? We've got to, because there's a different set of behaviours for both sides of the fence. A property speculator or a property investor. So if you're an investor, and I actively encourage people to be property investors because it's a growth asset that will work over time. Equally, I'd encourage somebody to be the other growth assets we know about are shares. I'd equally encourage people to get involved with those and do that either directly themselves or through a leveraged portfolio where you've got more skin in the game because you've done the same thing as you've done property. So, if somebody's trying to get off down in the weeds and stroke themselves about rental yield, the difficulty with property per se is that actually property as an investment is now really heavily worked over body corporate fees, stamp duties, and higher mortgage costs. You name it. Anybody that's a property investor, everybody's fighting on the button. And you've got to pay attention and do your maths early before you jump in. You must do your maths. The number I've unwound.
Sorry, guys. He's just jumped off the webcast there. We'll wait for a moment to see whether he returns. If he doesn't, we'll wrap it up and we'll leave it there. But so a few obviously key takeaways from what Ian was talking about. Great takeaways in terms of the spend, the savings mechanisms, and your intentions, sorting out your intentions before you make these decisions, I guess, to move forward long term. Get realistic, I think, is what the main point was there. But look, guys, I think he may have dropped out for good. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but look, it's been great to have Ian with us. He's a very, very knowledgeable guy. As we discussed, I have worked with him in the past, and I've seen him in action working with clients. If you need to actually get in contact with Ian, his email is Ian, I-A-N, Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, at topcover.com.au, and all this information as well will be in the show notes, the description part. Alrighty, guys. Thanks very much for listening. If you've managed to listen this far, any recommendations you have on who you'd like to see on the show are more than welcome. I've got a couple of ideas lined up, and sort of know who I want next week. So I'm going to chase him down and see whether we can't get him on. So again, guys, thank you very much for listening. Please don't hesitate to contact me, Johnny at brisbanerealestatetips.com, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks very much, guys.